Welcome to the Healthusiasm podcast, a panel discussion on trends and innovations in health and self-care. My name is Christophe Jauquet. I'm the author of the Healthusiasm books and a professional keynote speaker on health, business, and technology. Every week, I discuss with a panel of experts the positive changes that are shaping our health and happiness. And for this discussion, we have three panelists. Calling in from Barcelona is our digital health connector, Aline Loiset.
Hola.
Calling in from Zug near Zurich in Switzerland, patient expert Nathalie Bloom.
Hello.
Last but not least, from Ghent, Belgium, human experience expert Mo Zouina.
Hello there.
How was this for an intro? I sometimes have the feeling that if I do an intro, I'm not healthusiastic enough. Was the Viper immediately good? Are we good?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Then it's good. Because we'll be talking about something that I've mentioned, I think, probably for 8 months, maybe even more. And that is, there is a new book coming. There is a new book coming in my new book. How many times did I mention it? I can't remember even. But hey, since a week ago, my new book is out. It's called Trends and the Transformation Economy. And I'm happy to have this panel here with me because Mo and Nathalie, they both pre-read the book. In fact, Nathalie is actually an expert in Healthusiasm probably because she pre-read both books, the Healthusiasm book and my second book now. And I've tried to incorporate as much as possible your inputs. But also Aline, I think we mentioned already a lot here in the podcasts, the new book and all the things that are in there. But also last time we went for dinner in Barcelona, we talked quite a bit about it. So I'm really happy to discuss this. And I just received the physical copy, so you need to send me your addresses so I can send it to you directly and so that you can read it in its entirety as an actual book, of course. Mo, what did you want to say?
So first, I think I'd like to officially congratulate you on the book. And it's always been an aspiration, if we talk about aspiration, to try and to try and rank my thoughts in something that people would be able to understand. I haven't succeeded in it yet. And I think the effort to do that, especially with your forward thinking, is incredible. So I think the effort must have been excruciating. How do you convey something, a vision forward to something based on something that people do not necessarily understand, maybe sense, but not understand it, and do that in a clear and transparent way is something I have incredible respect for.
Yeah, thank you for that. And to be honest, I mean, I don't like the ideas. I don't like the visions to write. Most of the time when a book is finished, I'm already, sketching up the new one. It's like fashion designers do the same. I mean, when it goes on the catwalk, they're already tired of the show that they prepared, and it feels a bit the same. I do have to say it is excruciating, the whole process. And every time I finish the book, I rather feel like I'll never do that again, ever. Just until the moment you have the book in your hand, and that feels really, really nice, of course. But it's a question I often get: how do you write a book? The thing is that, first of all, I have a lot of ideas. That's not the purpose. I mean, that's not the problem. Let's put it that way. But the question is, how do you get it started? And I'm not quite sure. I start writing and it never ends. That's one of my maybe mistakes in the approach. Is better to have a framework and stick into that framework and not go too far, because this book is again 350 pages, so it's quite a extensive. Let's put it that way. But the idea basically immediately came after the first book. The first book, which was called Healthusiasm, talks about why are people more occupied with their health? Why does everyone wants to be healthy and happy? Maybe more now, today, than in the past. And what does this mean for organizations and businesses? What is their role in making customers healthy and happy? And the first book was really well received. I mean, when I did a market research shortly after to ask, does it make sense? And 92% of the people that replied to that market research said, yeah, I mean, making customers healthy and happy is it's one of the things that we need to do in a company. So they say they do agree with it. It's not always that easy. And that's when the first feedback came, and that's when the idea of the second book quickly developed. Because one of the questions that people asked me was, yeah, making customers healthy and happy, I get it, but what does it mean, right? healthy and happiness is so fluffy. I mean, you need to make it more concrete, and that is something that that you need to, try to have that sorted out in some more content that you make. And that's where, I mean, you mentioned the life aspirations. I mentioned it a couple of times on this podcast as well. That's where I actually wanted to go one level deeper than health and happiness. I wanted to define what it actually means. So I really wanted to understand, what does, for you, Mo, what does it mean to be healthy and happy? And I really tried to make that into something very concrete that is related to our, basic human desires, or human needs, our deepest needs that we have, because we all want to be healthy. But what does it mean? And so I came out with very obvious things like, people want to have more energy. People want to have less stress. They want to enjoy the moment. They want to develop themselves. They want to have a purpose. I mean, I remember one of your enthusiasms a little while ago, Mo, was people that have a purpose in life are more healthy and happy. And so this is one of the things that came out of it. I have 24 of such life aspirations. And so the book starts by explaining the fact that people today, they want to transform themselves. Because of technology, they feel that they can do a lot more themselves. So they can find those tools to impact how they feel, how healthy they are, how happy they are. So they feel more empowered. And that's why they have this focus on transformation. But not only themselves, there's a lot of crisis in the world. And I mean, we're talking about, the geopolitical crisis. We're talking about the mental health crisis, the climate change crisis, resource crisis. There's so many crises out there, and people want to do something about it. And that's where the transformation idea comes from. I often start my new keynotes in saying that transformations is the word of this new decade. And then people say, yeah, but I'm not quite sure whether that's true, because we've been talking about transformations for ages. I mean, the world has been transforming all the time. And then I say, yeah, but previously the focus is mostly on digital transformations. And digital transformation is really about how can we change processes. It has some sort more of an internal focus, whether it's in healthcare or beyond healthcare. It's always about how can we change things, how can we change the experience. But right now, transformation is more about how can we change ourselves? How can we change society? How can we change the planet? And this is driven by these life aspirations that people have that more than ever are present. People want to have an impact on their life. They want to become the best versions of their life. And in the book, the first two chapters talk about that. Why are we focused on transformations, and what are these drivers, these life aspirations underneath it? And then chapter 3, 4, and 5, they speak about transformational healthcare. What does this mean for healthcare? And what does this mean for business? That's chapter 4. And what does this mean for technologies? We talk a lot about technologies here and the potential impact they might have, but there's also, a flip side to technologies. And we saw this with social media. It's supposed to, increase your connections with people, but actually we never felt more lonely. So there's always a flip side to many of these things. And so we're looking into transforming our lives, society, and the planet in healthcare and business with technology. And that is what the book basically is about. And I think for this podcast, it might be interesting to quickly touch upon, transformational healthcare. But before I do so, maybe just open up the floor if there's any thoughts or questions or remarks that you have from your side on this regards.
Yeah, I have. Unfortunately, this is a podcast and you can't see the paper I've written on because it's a mess, because there's so many things that are triggered by what you're saying. But basically what I see is I acknowledge the fact that people are aspiring to live a healthy and happier life. And that secondly, there is value for brands and organizations to tap into that. So on the one hand, you have the consumers who aspire to something, and you have the brands and the business who aspire to serve them on that thing. And then in between these two, there's time and ability. And the problem is that with the transformation, we have completely skewed our notion of time. What do I mean by that? The fact that we are serviced incredibly well means that our patience has decreased. I think there is an impatience in aspiring to these things. And that impatience, as we see it right now, you just talked, it was 324 milliseconds until OpenAI ChatGPT 4.0 responded. So we have been also trained in impatience through technology. And there are things that you can't accelerate, whether it is in health, whether it is in transformation. So I think in between is the ability to serve and deliver these experiences to these consumers. So once again, it's human nature is in the equation, and we shouldn't ignore that. Human nature, human behavior, and that is not and human reflexes, and that is not a constant. I think technology has served us into reshaping behaviors. So the aspiration is right, the value is right for brands and businesses, but there's also a dynamic given that our aspirations are there, but our expectations change.
Yeah.
Right.
Expectations is what the first book was about. Aspirations is what this book is about again. And what you're saying is true in the sense that very often when we talk about aspirations, we think about improving. Like aspirations is per definition, it needs to be better and it needs to improve. But one of the insights in the book, when I was doing the research on aspirations, was that actually it is becoming aspiring to be less aspiring. It's okay to be not okay. And that is something that it's not just about improving. It's also about preventing. It's about accepting. It's about enjoying. And those are the four different buckets when it comes to aspirations that I have in there. I call it aspiration moderation. There's because what we've seen in the past is that I think it was in 2018 or 19, people felt less happy because they were over aspirational. So they exercised too much. They were too much focused on eating healthy, whatever you might have. They wanted to change the world way too much. And because of that, they felt, less happy than ever. So the thing is that ever since we've seen this, actually ever since COVID, that was basically the shift there where we became aspirational in a different way, where it's okay to be not okay, let's say. And sometimes the best version of yourself is to be, the version you are. It doesn't need to be even better. So I agree with that. And the impatience and the expectations is definitely in part of that. And that was mentioned in the first book. Expectations was really a big focus of the first book. Natalie, you read both books, right? Any thoughts from your side when you read it? You had a lot of insights already from your job as an insights manager. So does it resonate with you? Did you had anything that you liked, disliked, questions that you had, or?
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what Mo mentioned, and firstly, congratulations. I mean, it's a great amount of, fantastic work done, Trace. So, and I really like it because it's positive, it's very accessible, it's very inclusive. I think anyone who reads the book can relate to it to some degree. And I guess the thought that I had was transformation is not immediately obvious. It's quite abstract. And you only understand transformation when you look back in time to understand, how you've transformed, what were the turning points. And, you need, as, Mo alluded to that, like you need ability as well. You need the ability to reflect, so for me, the transformation, we all go through that and it's not immediately obvious what happened. It's not an event. It's not overnight for sure. It's a series of things. And then suddenly you realize you're kind of different. You have a new you. So I think that's interesting in itself. It's not easy to perceive that, and we should help people understand how do you do that better. And for me, the other thing about transformation in healthcare is also about capability, right? You can't talk about transformation without understanding what are the gaps today, what are the capabilities required to take people along the journey, right? It's a lot to ask for.
Yeah, so, I feel you. And indeed, the ability is something that we all sort of struggle with. I think it's fair to say that in some way, everybody's aspirational, and just in the same way that everybody wants to be healthy and happy. It's another thing to achieve aspirations or to pursue them decently. What I think, and I do agree with the fact that transformation, it's an overly used word, maybe even, and it's very vague in many ways. But what I try to describe with it is that somehow, as a person, more than in the past, maybe we're looking to evolve. We're looking to to grow as a person. I think the word growing has been maybe overused in the past or in recent years, but it's definitely a focus in our society. And this is what I refer to with the transformation economy, and with the way that people are looking for these transformations. And indeed, it might not immediately click in your head if you say, I want to feel transformed, but you definitely want to grow, and you definitely are aspirational. And that ability, I mean, we have some tools that are availability. We don't really always know them, find them easily. And that's why we are looking for help. And this is one of the roles that businesses, technologies, or healthcare in general could help us with, because there is this intrinsic desire to grow, to evolve, to transform yourself, or to have an impact on your environment, or to do something about the planet and the climate change. There is this definite aspiration. Aline, you want to jump in here, or do I continue first talking about what it means for healthcare? What are your thoughts?
Well, I can share with you like what I've been thinking about, like when I read the newsletter that you wrote about summarizing the first part of the books. I started thinking where we are and where we're going, and like the transformation in the middle of that. So something that I really like and that I really believe in is the customers, the patients are at the center now. They're more empowered. And it's true that today we have more tools to take care of our health. No, that's also what we call like digital front door. And I think some companies have understand that very well. So transformation, yes, but transformation in a way that's seamless and doesn't feel like a transformation. Make it easy for us. So when you we are used to doing things in a certain way, and to bring those services inside that routine that we have, so it doesn't really disrupt us. Transformation is here, but like easier. So if we think about Amazon Pharmacy, we've talked about it in the past, no? Like now it's included into Prime, so you just use your Prime services and you can access those services. And then you have some services online, like in the US, the women who want to order their pill, they can just go on a website like 28, and they just write in a chat what they want. Someone will review those information and they will send you the pill directly at home. So very like seamless experience. Like you're in control. You can do what you want. Then we've got solutions like Day in the UK, where you can order a kit online to do like cervix screening for women. So again, you decide. Or companies like Aileen in Spain, where you can order some blood tests. Like if I want to check my cholesterol level, or my hormone levels, or if I've got ads, for instance, like I can do that. I decide, I order online. But in thinking about that, I also wondered about the role of the healthcare professionals, because I think this is still important. I think we should, in that transformation, I was wondering, like, should we really move in a society where us patients, consumers, are in control without the supervision or the advice of the healthcare professionals? And for me, that figure is important and should remain as it is, not like a reference. And that reflection came also from the company Natural Circle, the fertility app. So it's an app that can be used to get pregnant and not to get pregnant. So you measure your temperature every morning, and it's telling you, yes, today you can get sex or no. And you order it online on your own. You don't need to go to a healthcare professional. And it actually became a medical device in Canada in January this year. And some gynecologists like raised some concerns about that, because they find it can be dangerous for young women who are using it for contraception, because they say that like stress, life events, lack of sleep can affect the duration of your periods, and can have an effect on such apps. And also something that I found very interesting is that the other concern is that when a young woman wants to take the pill, traditionally she was going to the gynecologist to get it prescribed. But now, if they're using those apps online and they're accessing those apps on their own, they're not going to the gynecologist anymore, which means that they are not doing an annual checkup. And I think that's where we're losing a bit the figure of the healthcare professionals. And where, yes, we're transforming, we're getting empowered, but we may be losing something regarding our health at the same time.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it in episode 22. We did a special episode on understanding the closing of Walmart Health, and we ended up discussing, what there's self-care, there's primary care, there's specialty care, and the self-care bunch is growing rapidly, driven by those transformations and these aspirations that people have. Specialty care is going very fast in a very specialized direction, but then we have this primary care role, which basically I called it no man's land. It's up for grabs, whatever you may call it. It's a little bit of it's not a vacuum, but they need to re-identify their role in healthcare, because I mean, this is changing because of the aspirations and because of the transformations that are happening with, you call it the digital front door. It needs to be easy. It needs to be, happy. The people need to have a great experience with it. And so that changes, and that puts a little bit of pressure on that middle field, the primary care fields. Mo?
Yeah, when I heard Aline talk, I just realized that the aspiration is incredibly valuable, and it connects potentially a lot of companies with an aspiration that people find incredibly valuable. But health, through recent research, has also been decrypted as being something that is interconnected, that health is not just one element. It is a combination of elements that need to be, addressed in order to achieve well-being, right? So what do we see? We see an incredibly exponential increase in information and data. We see a decrease on relative knowledge of people of their own health. And we see companies servicing these people on a holistic need with fragmented solutions. And I think there might be a big issue if we want to aspire to something that, as you said, Christophe, is so holistically important. We need to understand the fact that it depends from connecting the dots. And that's what Aline was saying, is if you offer people fragmented solutions, they will, I think, maybe at some point get tired of trying.
Well, I sort of disagree there.
Yeah, because a lot of companies try to address a segment or a fragment or a thing like that. And I think there's an incredible value in, if you have that app, does it connect with something you're already using? Is it giving a background context on how that is important? I see it systematically with my partner being a holistic physician, that people try to add the fragmented solution in order to achieve to something that is holistic.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
No, what I'm trying to say is that I think we're trying to say the same thing, but we do see things as slightly different. I don't think we see more fragmented solutions. I actually think that the fragmented solutions, they don't survive. There might be some, tryouts left and right, but what we see more and more is actually a more holistic approach of health. And I think the examples that Aline was giving came from the women's health industry. And I have to look deeper into each of these examples perhaps, but typically speaking, if you look at the women's health sector, the femtech industry, they look at it way more from a holistic point of view than any other business. They start from being women. They approach not one specific disease or one specific medical condition or health, I wouldn't call it issue, but item, but they look at it from what it is to be a woman. And in the book, I specifically have a chapter on women's health. And actually, we talked about it already. I think it was the very, very first episode that we did with the Healthusiasm podcast was on women's health, and more specifically on the fact that more and more we look things from a human perspective, from a woman's perspective, and not specifically from one specific disease or one specific solution. We no longer, and that is my message mainly to the healthcare industry in general, is that stop thinking about purely solving a medical need, but think about to go two steps further. Solving a medical need is wonderful, but you need to take into account the expectations, what you said earlier, the speed, the easiness, those kind of things, the impatience that we have. And then you need to look at the aspirations. And aspirations have basically nothing to do with the medical needs. It's about what is important in people's life. And if you have these three elements, needs, expectations, and aspirations, then you can actually come to those wonderful solutions that are way more engaging. And I think this is what we see in women's health. This is what we see in metabolic health, which we also talked about on the episode at some point. This is what we see in mental health even. And I think this shift in those three fields, to me, is radically changing healthcare. And the way that, I mean, you mentioned your partner in life who is a holistic physician. I think this is a trend that we're seeing. We're moving away from diseases and we're going into a holistic approach of being a human.
Yeah, but let me add that up a notch. You talked about female health, metabolic health, and mental health, but they're all connected.
Yeah, and they're even connected, yeah.
Yeah, and they are connected. So the challenge, I think we'll have to evolve through a stage where these fragmented solutions are just flushed out.
True.
Right? Where they're not viable. On the other hand, starting a holistic service through technology might be an incredible task, right? Because it requires a scale that is not accessible. So I think it will have an effect on health entrepreneurship, for instance, because to make it viable, it needs to address that. I saw Natalie nodding also a few times. Natalie.
No, that's so much there. In my time working in what I notice is it's fragmented actually in healthcare at the moment. I mean, the aspiration is always to be holistic, but the way it requires so much change, a mindset change from the side of the organization. It relies on a completely different operating model, right? From the pharmaceutical side, not to be product centric. And that is also a big ask, right? So it requires a completely different kind of partnership. So, to give a concrete example, I think pharmaceutical companies still launch individual solutions for a branded product, even if the journey may start from an unbranded and then it goes on to a branded experience. So they're supporting patients who are currently on their drugs, right? Like a patient support program. But then from the HCP side, they're getting all these patient support programs from different pharmaceutical companies promoting their drugs. And it doesn't really make sense because if, let's say, I'm a dermatologist and I have, these number of branded products, I suddenly have all these PSPs to talk about, and depending on which product the patient is on and so on. That is distracting. And it doesn't make their lives easier from the point of the HCP.
No. And that is still the reality today in healthcare. And that's also why, pharmaceutical companies are acting that way or have to act that way. But I do agree with Mo in a sense that even women's health and mental health and metabolic health are closely related. I think we see that in the way that aging is studied right now. If you look at the causes for aging and the diseases that it causes when you grow older, they're all very much related into clusters even. And that's why at a certain point in the book, I have a whole chapter talking about, and this is, confirming what you're saying, Mo, and totally agreeing there, and even go maybe one step further and saying like diseases will become irrelevant in the future, or at least they'll become less relevant than today, because we will approach health from a more holistic point of view. And by doing so, we will cover way more, diseases and even have a bigger impact on our health overall.
I think to acquire that, to get to that point, you also need to change the healthcare system. Like I was thinking about Spain and how things are right now. Like you have 6 minutes to see your healthcare professional in the public system. The private system, it's not much better. Like healthcare professionals, I paid like 5-7 euros per patient. It's not motivating for them. So that approach that would be ideal of like holistic, like talking to the patient, understanding what's wrong, it's not happening right now. So we need transformation of the system to arrive to that holistic position and maybe do what your partner is doing more.
Christophe, you as the expert, what would be the first step into generating a new type of value, a new type of revenue model? Because what Natalie said is true. The system is not going to change if the revenue model is not going to change. So where can companies that aspire to do that unlock value that in the end might be landing on a new revenue model?
So it's a $1 million question you're asking here on a free podcast.
Where would they start? I don't have to say what do they have to do, but where would they have to start?
So where do they have to start to change the model? I think I had a bit of an answer ready, and then I made a joke, and then I lost it somewhere. So let's just put it that way. No, I believe right now the first question is, whose revenue model are you talking about? Is it the hospital? Is it the physician? Is it the pharma company? Or is it the government? Because there's different dynamics here. And I think one of the reasons why change in the whole healthcare spectrum is difficult is because the ones that pay are not the ones that benefit, right? We have this third payer system, which actually makes or causes troubles for us. It makes sure that the innovation does not go where it needs to be. And I think that is one of the difficulties. So if I look at, and again, I come to that healthcare spectrum story where there's self-care, primary care, and specialty care. I think specialty care, they need to adopt AI and continue to go deeper into the specialty modus. Self-care will be driven by businesses, will be driven by direct revenue model where people are willing to pay for it. Also because the thresholds will be lower and because the solutions are more accessible. But the self-care space is today already 4 times as big as the pharmaceutical space. So this is and I expect it to grow way faster as well. So I'm not too worried about the self-care space, and I think it will become more relevant, more important. It will be more difficult for people to understand where they need to go, but maybe personal assistance and conversational AI and those kind of things might somewhat help in the future. But it will be a very wild west type of fast acting, big revenue type of business. But I do expect that the revenue model there is okay. To me, the biggest hurdle and the biggest difficulty is the bridge between two again. It's the primary care setting, where it's hard to see a physician for longer than 6 minutes, where you're still dependent on availability, where you are dependent on reimbursement, where, Keith referred to it in one of the previous podcasts. For some diseases, we don't diagnose because the healthcare system would be overwhelmed because of the false positives potentially. So I think, to me, the revenue model is good in the specialized sites. The revenue model is good in the self-care setting, although there's quite some challenges there as well. I really think that the thing in between, I'm not quite sure about. Aline, you were reflecting upon it. I saw you thinking really loud.
Yeah, I don't really agree with you with that there's really a market for self-care, because in Europe, especially, it works better in the US, but in Europe, we are so used to having everything provided by the healthcare system reimbursed. Like, why should I pay? If everything is covered by the healthcare system. And I know the startups were trying to go B2C, business to consumers. In Europe, they are really struggling. So I think some verticals, maybe women's health in certain countries, are working, but it's really tough. And I don't think that's the way to.
It's an interesting debate, I think, because what I see in that regard, and I do agree, willingness to pay in Europe because of the reimbursement system is different. And definitely the closer it comes to healthcare, the less they are willing to pay. What I do see of when startups go from a reimbursement strategy to a B2C strategy is they didn't figure it out to do it yet. Because most of the time, those semi-healthcare solutions or those self-care solutions that comes close to healthcare, they are used to, going to a very niche audience, physicians, those kind of things, to promote one or the other solution. Now, if you go B2C, it requires different level of budgets. And if you're in a venture fund that is focused on healthcare, also they don't know what the levels of investment and marketing is. This is repetitive, big budget marketing, and you're sure to be growing, revenues, but definitely not profits in the first 3 to 6 years, maybe. And I think this is something when I look at, the healthcare, self-care / healthcare companies, startups in that space, they don't have any experience in B2C. And they underestimate the level of investment, they underestimate the level of selling. We don't sell in healthcare. We don't need to sell. It's indirect selling. But selling in consumer space this is hard selling. This is like selling advertisement. And I see a lot of companies that don't have that experience. So I do agree But I also see that the reason why some of the startups are struggling is just because they don't have the expertise yet.
That's a very good point. I've experienced in that as being a part of Relief Clinic, where we try to service people outside of the healthcare system for a primary condition, which is pain or musculoskeletal pain. And on top of that, there's an interesting trilogy to that, because with my background in advertising and human behavior, we have three elements there. We have the clinician. We have me that thinks about human behavior and communication. And then there's Fred, who knows that. And it's true that physicians do not have the skills to engage in that kind of commercial setting where they have to sell to consumers because they think that their clinical expertise is enough to do that and to connect with that. And then the willingness to pay is also something. And the higher the discomfort is, the more they're willing to pay. You're absolutely right. Engaging with consumers or patients outside of the healthcare system requires a totally new approach. And it's a long and strenuous effort, but the output is really interesting, because especially what we do in pain, and we see the reactions, and then you get word of mouth, and that kind of works really well. But the experience is really, really tough.
I fully agree. And I think it's because we were talking about how will this evolve, and is how big is self-care, and where will the revenue change? I think this is all part of it. This is where the revenue model will change. And I think there is an external force that we maybe underestimate a little bit in healthcare, and that is the decentralization of healthcare. When we talk about decentralization of healthcare, we think about, discharging patients earlier from the hospital. We talk about telehealth. But I think, the decentralization of health in general has to do with, clinics like the one that you're running, or all these self-care solutions that are out there. I think it's really about how people can take things in their own hands. And I mean, I think I love this one example incredibly, which is you might have heard of it, the artificial pancreas that was created. Oh yeah, it's an amazing story. I mentioned it in the book as well, but it's about, there was a need in the diabetic community, diabetic type 1, to automatically, I might miss some of the details here, but to automatically be able to measure your glucose or your insulin and then automatically, inject yourself. There was no such solution on the market. So it's basically an artificial pancreas. And there was no such solution on the market. And the diabetic community, the type 1 diabetic community, was pushing, or lobbying, if you will, towards all these medtech companies to actually put it on the market. And they say, yeah, but it's difficult, takes time, blah, blah, blah. And so they did it themselves. They just hacked a couple of devices together, created a GitHub where all people could see the different software and the code, even in the software themselves, could adapt it to themselves, whatsoever. And it created a community. Again, Natalie, what you mentioned as well in previous podcasts, is that the community of patients will have a lot of enthusiasm, healthusiasm, to have a massive impact. And this is the type of decentralization that we might see, even when it comes to, this is almost primary care or even specialty care we're talking, and it is being decentralized. Patients are transforming the way that it is done. Basically, we're back to transformations because they want to have that specific. Great. Look, I'll make sure that I'll send you the version of the book. I will send you some of the shirts as you was asking, Aline. I would like to thank all of you, because again, here, we discussed things that were not in the book. Many of the things that are in the book, we discussed in the past. I mentioned women's health in episode 1, mental health in episode 10, metabolic health in episode 2, and many, many other stuff that were discussed here on the Healthusiasm podcast. So all of you, Mo, Aline, Natalie, a big part of the writing of the book as well, but also Aditi, Krupa, Keith, and even all of our guests in the past, you were a big contributor to this new book, Trends in the Transformation Economy, which if you want to know more about, you can go to healthusiasm.com, where you can easily find a link to the book. Anything you want to add to that? Or I'll just wrap up the podcast for this week.
Well done, Christophe.
Well, thank you again, all of you, for this contribution. And thank you for your healthusiasms. And you, for the listener, thank you for listening. If you like the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. You can also visit healthusiasm.com to discover the other episodes, subscribe to the newsletter, and learn more about our panelists. For now, I'd like to thank our panelists for their healthusiasm. Thank you, Aline Noiset, Mozowina and Natalie Bloomfield. We are the Healthusiasm panel, and we'd love to see you again next week for some more Healthusiasm. Ciao.